Yeah, thank you. Two preliminaries. The one is I have two books you might be interested in. The one is my relationship to this lovely little dog here and the conclusions I draw for the rights of animals, because I'm totally convinced this guy has reason and deserves the right to autonomy. And if you don't believe me, read the book and then we can discuss the issue. It's in English. The other one, sadly, is in German, so maybe there are not many here who read that. But this is a story that just came out 2 weeks ago. It's 8 years of radical animal activism from 1989 to 1997, and it's a story. It's not fiction, and it's also not just facts archived, but it's a story of a person going to England, diving into this movement, and eventually fleeing out of it. That's why it's called in the underground. Anyway, there's time gone by. Second preliminary, I'm impressed by the conference, what I've heard so far, although with the new mood of checking everything with psychological studies, I'm not sure what is the truth and what is just an advert in order to motivate us. I would appreciate a bit more open debates on things, disagreements. Either they don't exist or I miss them. But on top of that, I want to say I will be a bit of critical, but I won't tell anybody what to do, you know. I'm sure everybody, what you're doing is the right thing to do for your situation and for your goals, but I still will be slightly critical. And that is because of my experience that we had in the last years. For those who don't know me or the situation where I'm coming from, we had campaigns in order to improve the situation for animals in Austria for a long time. And we had quite a list of successes. In 1998, we got a ban on fur farming. Looking at you, maybe half of you weren't alive then. So it's quite some time ago. And we followed this up in 2002 with a ban on wild animal circuses. And 2004, we got a ban on enriched cages. And in the same year, we got all the supermarkets to drop selling cage eggs in Austria. 2005, we got a reform on releasing game birds, which we followed up last year with a ban on releasing game birds in Austria. 2006, we got a ban on great ape experiments. In 2007, we got a ban on caging rabbits. So this is not allowed anymore in Austria. On top of that, we got a ban on farrowing crates and sow stalls in Austria. And we have achieved probably the lowest stocking density for broiler and turkeys. But we also got a big repression wave by the government against us. We had home raids, we had persecution, being on trial for blackmail, for forming criminal organizations. They tried to destroy our group very urgently. I was in prison for 105 days on remand, just to be found not guilty afterwards and having to pay almost €1 million on defense costs that the Supreme Court ruled is my fault. The Austrian Supreme Court actually said somebody who behaves like me must expect to be prosecuted and therefore is liable for the defense costs, which is quite amazing. We have just gone to the European Court of Human Rights, but I must say after so many years of being in court, last year or the year before, it was 36 court cases against me running consecutively, so I have quite some court experience now. I don't trust them. Yeah, the right of law and then what happens to you, this is a very different pair of shoes. And essentially what I want to do is present to you the problems we're running up against right now. And then I wonder why you don't. We'll see. If you ask, do we achieve animal rights, then you usually hear the saying, I do. First they ignore you, then they ridicule you, then they fight you. You end up in prison, and then you win. So that should be the next thing that happens, shouldn't it? But for some reason, prison is always coming closer. But I take I take some motivation from Aaron's talk yesterday, who said there will be a breakdown. So, and then there will be the victory. Yeah, if only it was so easy. How far have we got? I've recounted to you the list of successes we had in Austria, and obviously there are some more. Also on the EU level, we have some achievements. If I'm counting right, then there are 11 fur-farm bans. They're so nicely, quickly happening that I'm not sure if I'm up to date. And 41 worldwide countries banning wild animal circuses. Yes, then we have these enriched cage ban. We have campaigns to get the cage eggs out of the sales, and it seems to work. We have restrictions on sow stalls, and we have a ban on chaining mother pigs, and so on. And we have the vegan boom, but we still have factory farms. This one is the biggest Austrian with 64,000 pigs. And this is the biggest broiler farm and another pig factory. And they don't seem to have gone away. We still have farrowing crates. I mean, in Austria there's a ban, but it will start in 2033. And we'll see what happens till then. We still have turkey barns full of turkeys. We have the enriched cages, at least in Europe, not in Austria. And we have the live animal transport, seems to be unhindered. So the question is, can we go on like this with reforms? And then we eventually have a vegan world or liberated animals. The new Austrian government is a right-wing government, and it has it means a lot of trouble. There is an animal protection. I mean, we have really just a few points. What this government means to us. We have an animal protection ministry since 2005, and this minister the new one has no interest whatsoever in animal rights. Nobody is able to talk to them, meet them, or hear anything they might want to say. They actually removed the post of the highest civil servant on animal protection in their ministry. So essentially, they have removed animal protection from their ministry. They have put economy, or are about to, economy as a goal, as a state goal, into the constitution. They have put animal production into the constitution as a goal. So basically, Austria has a goal to have animal production, produce animal products, and basic animal research as well. Our Prime Minister publicly says animal protection is a private issue. It's not a political issue, so don't bother me with it. It's a private affair, and it's a matter of consumer choice. At the same time, as I will show you, they're introducing draconian laws to get people in prison who film animal factories. So essentially what they're saying is consumers should choose on the basis of meat adverts, because they shouldn't get any other information. I recently learned that in Germany, so it's not only Austria, in Germany, the head of state of Bavaria, which is a conservative, said that it's not the other parties who are the main political enemy, but it's NGOs. And that is definitely the case in Austria too. And here, possibly in Sweden, we have a similar development. The question is this just a swing of the pendulum? Sometimes there's a government that listens to animals, sometimes there's animal protectionists, sometimes there's not, and we just have to wait, and in 5 years there's a new government, everything's different again. But there is one development that is one directional, that doesn't go back. And this development is that the rich are getting richer, and the poor are getting poorer, and the industries are getting ever more powerful and politically influential. And that is a decisive change from the decade to decade that's getting worse. We have now, statistics say the 8 richest people have as much money as half of the world, of the poorest. And imagine what that means, you know. There's 4 billion people that have as much money as 8 people. How much influence do these 8 people have? And they're not democratically accountable. You know, they just show me that government that doesn't listen to them and do what they say. And they are not democratically voted. There is a number of studies on this that say that this gap will widen and widen until there is another big war or anything that breaks society structure down. Actually, if you look back, then the First World War just set everything more or less straight, then the gap widened again, then the Second World War, then the gap is widening it again. So shall we wish for another world war? I don't know, but question is, how can that development be stopped? I'm a bit worried that there is, no, that's fine. I hope I can start this again. This is a language that I don't understand. What went down? That this I can see that icon. So hopefully, yeah. Thanks. Okay. Yeah, there is a book that I'm also trying to read up on books, as has been suggested here, and I think it's a good idea. And I wrote a book about how big business is destroying the world. And there is a quote on the beginning, and that says, don't expect big business to be ethical. Big business is always acting like a psychopath without any empathy or morals, because they have one goal, and there's no evil, you know, this is structural. They have one goal, and that's increasing the business. And they employ people for doing that. And if those people fail, then they chuck them out and get other ones. So if whatever your moral stance as a CEO, if you fail to increase profits, then you're chucked out. So the business can't care. The business can't be empathetic and moral. So but what about green business policies as come up every now and then? Yes, I would not say that this is just simply greenwashing and nothing else. But on the other hand, it cannot disrupt their general course of action. It will still be towards more profit. Otherwise, their whole procedure doesn't work. So, so greenwashing alone is not going to solve or bring animal liberation. Actually, I've also started reading a book, which is a scientific work on the comparison of cancer growth and the growth of business. And it seems to be mathematically equivalent. And as a mathematician, I'm going to read that up, but I'm pretty convinced it's similar, having some experience with cancer growth recently. But I mean, if you say now, but there is the vegan boom, isn't there? There's the vegan boom, and that might save us, you know. They might become ever more important, the industries, but there's the vegan boom. We have done an opinion poll in Austria with an error margin of plus minus 1.4%. Oh, I see the bottom, you can't see. And there's some interesting results. I mean, it is encouraging. Because it says that 1.2% are vegan, non-vegetarian, vegan, and 8.3% are non-vegan vegetarians. In some, 9.5%. Sounds not so bad. The only problem is that in 1994, we had already 4%. So it's 5% in 25 years of intense vegan outreach. So how long do we need till we are 100%? On the other hand, something that learning from you and the use of psychological studies, I didn't say, is that just 3 years ago, we had an opinion poll and there were only 5% vegetarians. And then another 2 years before, we had an opinion poll with 7%. And then another one before that with 8%. So can we trust those numbers? At least in this opinion poll, it says the 14 to 30-year-olds are 16% veggie if you add the vegan and non-vegan vegetarians. Students are 30% veggie, which sounds good. The question is what happens if they come into family life, into employment life? Do they still stick to this? How much is the pressure that life puts on them sort of stopping their vegan lifestyle, because it is not so, as we all know, that somebody who is vegan stays vegan. Earnings also the richest, the least vegan. Vienna is a pretty veggie city with 15% veggies, or vegan and non-vegan vegetarians. 83% say that they either eat occasionally or more often meat. While in the rural mountain provinces of Austria, and there are some provinces with 90% land uninhabitable, that's supposed to mean uninhabitable. So only 10% of the land you can live, and there's only 1% vegetarian and 0% vegan. Old age pensions also not particularly good in this. They're 0% vegan and 2% non-vegan vegetarians. So there is some development. Is there? The latest numbers are a bit up and down. The one measure that is for me important that says, do these people only talk, or is there really something happening, is what the consumption of meat per head is saying. And here are the Austrian numbers from 1995 to 2017, the newest numbers. In 1999, we founded the Vegan Society, doing very strongly vegan outreach from then onwards. It's a big vegan society now. We have can't remember now, but 20 employees maybe. I'm still in the council there. And a lot of vegan outreach. And then you look at these numbers up there, and it goes a bit up and it goes a bit down. From 2009, it slightly goes down, 0.1% a year. The biggest drop is the last year, which is maybe a little bit of hope. But all in all, if you look at that from a distance, it looks unchanged, to be honest. Worse, if you look at poultry meat consumption, that is actually increasing all the time, vegan campaigns or not, and it also dropped a bit at the end, but if you look at the number, we are much higher in consumption than we were 10 or 15 years ago. This is beef, which has decreased a bit, but not lately. In the last 4 years, it has increased. So actually the whole meat consumption dropped. The slight drop, one has to say, of about 2 to 3% in the last years is due to not eating pork, which is the most important meat in Austria. So I'm not so sure if these numbers are something that I would want to rely on for future success. The meat industry, I read in this book about the big business destroying the planet. The meat industry has 500 billion euro to spend each year on meat advertising. This is what we are up against with our little stalls. Yes, across the world there are lots of people doing a lot of leafleting, but can you be up against 500 billion euro? I mean, if we add all the vegan outreach investments that we do a year, I don't think we come anywhere close to this number. So essentially the meat industry is vastly stronger. It could be that the higher consumption per se is offsetting a bit of the vegan boom, but in any case, we have to say we are still less than 10% vegan vegetarians, and apparently that doesn't really show in the meat consumption per head. There's also a political thing that stops developments for this meat production, and this is farming subsidies. In Austria, there's 2.5 billion euro given to farmers, and 80% of them is going into animal production. So every time you buy something that is totally vegan, you pay for animal farming. And that's unavoidable if you don't do political campaigning that actually stops this political direction. Only 2% of subsidies go to fruit and veg farming. The biggest, and there is a report, a black report on farming subsidies in Austria, and it says, if you read it, that the 4 largest slaughterhouses get 1 million euro for free from the government each year. I mean, our society, or the VGT, has about 1 million, I wish, 1 million euro a year budget, but we as a state give as much to any slaughterhouse that wants it, anytime. You know, being vegan or not doesn't change that. It only changed that if you force the government somehow or other with a political campaign to stop doing that nonsense. Also, the largest pig factory got 1 million euro for free. And the second largest one got 700,000 euro for free. And there is one example what happens if meat consumption drops due to the bird flu some years ago. Poultry consumption suddenly went down by 30%, and then the government bought the non-sold meat with the taxes of, amongst others, vegans who buy vegan products. So if we stop eating that, then they will still buy it. To get a look at what the influence of this big business is, there is this Red Bull company that is worth a few billions, And one thing they did a few years ago was just the owner fancying that is an Austrian. And he said, why don't we start a Formula One racing team? And I don't want to insult Formula One fans, but I mean, this guy spent 300 million just on this little quirk of an idea, like this. Oh, let's buy a Formula One team and start a race. And since then, he's investing 300 million a year in this team. So this is a person who just shakes a little his hands and he can produce 300 VGTs in Austria with a flip of his finger. You know, we can do all the campaigning we want, but he can put this up in no time. Yeah, it's not easy to come up against those people. And now there's a number of direct consequences of that I think we're starting increasingly to feel. Big business is a lot about having a free range of doing what they want to do in order to produce profits. And one thing is stop negative reporting. And for doing that, they start buying up media. You can say this is a business venture, although media doesn't really produce much money maybe, but in reality, this is a political move. And for example, the company network that owns most of the factory farms in Austria owns half the Austrian media. I mean, let that sink in. Half the media is owned by the factory farms. So you're making a report critical about factory farms. Guess what these media will be doing. And if you say media independent, aren't they? Then I say, wake up. I don't think so. They aren't independent. They're very much looking on the numbers. And I have just recently, together with him, we were at a meeting in a lower Austrian province where the government has been safely in that seat for a while and is very pro-factory farming. And they bought all the newspapers. In this province, there's no provincial newspaper that is not owned by the factory farming community. And indeed, it is impossible to get a single story that is critical into that media. There was a critical media, regional district media, and I know the head of this group. And they were approached by them factory farming people, and they said, if you keep criticizing, then we won't pay your advertisements. They didn't buy the media, but they said, we pay you advertisements. All other media get advertisements payment, you don't. So if you stop doing this, you will get advertisement money. And they stopped doing this, and now they get advertisement money. Just recently in the news, themselves, there was a newspaper claiming that another newspaper that is sort of their competitor got 10.9 million euro, and they themselves only got 1.6 million euro. They complained about that. But again, it tells me this is a dimension of money that we cannot compete with. This is 10.9 times the whole VGT budget. Shall we put that into advertisements in the newspapers in order to compete? Hunters have an influence on the media that you wouldn't believe. I've put down there 2 little examples, which, yeah, you can read actually. I have a lot of examples. Yeah, if I show you those examples, this is not just a tiny bit. This is the tip of the iceberg. There's a lot more to this, and I can give you a lot of examples of that kind. But there was a hunter who attacked activists, and he was a rich and famous hunter, and he still is. And he has a big area that he owns, and he owns a big company, and he is sort of well perceived in the media. And he actually paid people to attack activists. And there was a court that said he did that, and this court ruling is very clear. He lied in court, he made up evidence, and he injured people, and he took with force their video cameras and a mobile away from them. And it is impossible to get that story into the media. It is impossible. We have done everything we could. We have spoken to the media. We have done press conference. We have done press releases, maybe 20 on that already. You don't get into the media. And if you speak to the media, they say, no, we are not reporting negatively about this guy. We're just not. He can kill you, and we won't report on this. So what do you do in that situation? I mean, what we do is now we put little postcards into every post box in the town in order to start informing them on that level. But you know, if I sort of put myself into this guy's shoes, okay, I can beat people and take with violence their stuff away, and the court will say you have done that, and I get no fine, I get no negative reporting about this. I mean, this is not a sort of balanced democratic procedure that is happening here. We were on a stall, and fur farming long since banned in Austria. Still fur adverts in the newspapers. No reporting about fur farming in other countries. I see a chief editor of a newspaper. I went to him and asked him, why don't you report about fur farming, actually? And then he literally said to me, yeah, and face to face, he said to me, if you pay me more than the color adverts of the fur industry, I report on fur farming. So that's the score, you know? Talking about being good in getting something into media, having money getting something into media seems to be the future. I don't know how you manage. I don't know. It's also a matter of big business getting organized against you, obviously. If they feel there are too many critical voices, then they might start buying the media and turning you off. And that might be what's happening now. Big business is also buying science. They hate nothing more than there is an objective scientific report on this and that is, from an animal welfare perspective, damaging, or this and that is damaging to the environment, or this and that is threatening species, like for hunting. And they've bought up all that. There is, when I was young and studying ages ago, there was independent science. I was a scientist for 12 years, and I never had industry coming to me and telling me what to do. So you'd have thought there was independent science. But today, it's all third-party finances. You can't do a scientific work without getting funds from industry, at least 50%, before the universities pay you the rest. And this is the strategy with which big business and the hunting fraternity is making up the science as they go along. All wilderness ecological institutes in Austria are in the hands of hunters in Austria, full stop. This is a fact. You don't get, if you want to have a scientist, you have to go abroad. And we do that. But, or if they go into pension, then they're also becoming more objective and honest about things. But as a matter of fact, you don't get a scientist who is not dependent financially on the hunting fraternity, so you can't get independent science. And they use that broadly, you know. Every time there is an issue, they bring this independent scientist who is in fact paid by them and who says exactly what they want to have him say. And if you think, you know, I'm making that up because I'm just incapable of finding scientists or something, then I have a number of situations where I can prove that that's the case. I have a scientist who is now working with us, who was employed by this Ecological Institute, and she was criticizing the strategy of feeding stags until the forest is eaten up in order to be shot, so that there are many stags to be shot. And she had a scientific study on this and proved that that was a bad strategy. She was thrown out immediately. They were dropped like a hot potato. Somebody who does critical things on the practices of today's hunting immediately loses their job. And she never was able to get a job again in this issue till today. I have a number of examples of that. Factory farming, it's the whole same story. You have the independent scientists doing pig farming and studying the welfare of pigs, and what's the consequence? That they can't speak with you about this, or they speak with you on the sort of 4-eye meeting, but they don't speak in public. And if they speak in public, it suddenly sounds very different, because they can't jeopardize their third-party finances. And actually, this is also a feature of big business being active against you. I am banned from a number of universities from speaking at all. You know, it's also strange, isn't it? You would have thought a university is a free space where you can debate, and I'm banned. I'm banned from the University of Vienna. I'm banned from the Veterinary University. I'm banned from the university in Lower Austria. I'm not allowed to go even to a seminar and hold a speech. And that's free speech and screen. And bring that into the media. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. The same is true for alternative research to vivisection. Nobody is able to actually speak about it. So I have to speed up a bit, apparently. The big business influence on politics is also amazing. I'll show you the last points only for time. This new government has now pushed on by animal industries, brought in a number of new laws, or is about to bring them in, without any debates. This is typical right-wing government. They just say, this is the next law, and this is the next law, and this is the next law, and you deal with it. And the first law they brought in is the 10% rule that says you can breach animal welfare measures by 10% anytime without penalty. Isn't that weird? From what area do you know something like that? You can suddenly stuff in 10% more chickens into the same barn. You can tighten the chain 10% more for the cow if you tie them up. Everything's the 10% rule. Next thing is we have 27 citizens' initiatives running at the moment against the new building of factory farms, of especially pig factory farms, but generally factory farms. And this government is about to bring in a law that says such delay can only be 1 year. So after 1 year, any farm can be built, even if they breach all regulations and if there's an environmental disaster and if all people living around them don't like it. This is this 1 year rule that they suddenly bring in. So there's no procedure necessary anymore for any hearing citizens or anyone. After 1 year, any big factory can be built. Then there is a new laws coming in against environmental NGOs. We as animal NGOs are not able to do legal procedures against animal projects. We haven't got the legal standing for that. We demand it, but with this government we can forget it. But generally, we haven't got legal standing. The environmental NGOs do have legal standing, and this legal standing is now being dismantled. They say any NGO who wants to be allowed to do legal procedures against an environmentally damaging thing must give to the government name, address, telephone number, date of birth of every their citizens and donators, every their members and donators. So they want to see them all. I don't know what they want to do with that, but I mean, it is clear that normal NGOs won't do that. So essentially, they're switching off this way of doing. Another thing is repression against activism. They've introduced a law also just like that with a demo ban zone. So every time somebody does a hunt poll, we have to move away 150 meters and stand somewhere far away in order for this poll not to be disrupted. There was the milk marketing board had a milk day in a city. And on this milk day, we usually, year after year, go there and distribute critical leaflets. So what they did now is to have their stalls where they distribute the pro-milk leaflets strategically placed in that city so that that demo zone forbid us to be at all in that city. So they can, with this law, just completely remove any critical voice. They banned animal masks. You know, you cannot use an animal mask on a demo anymore in Austria. We had this person who was dressing up like a cow and distributing leaflets critical to milk. He was arrested by police, brought into a police cell, put there for hours, and then fined 150 euro. And on top of that, like actions like this, where we criticize the shredding of one-day-old chicks, is not possible if the people don't put the mask backwards on. Otherwise, the demo is banned. They have they're about to introduce gag laws of imprisoning you or allowing police to raid your offices and to prosecute you if you have filmed in a factory farm. And there's an additional law in the planning, and will come out any minute, that actually forces you to destroy all film that has been filmed without consent of the owner of the farm. There's a law that has already come in that is filming on public land, on a public road. If you film a driven hunt on a public road, this is made illegal. In addition to that, they have banned radical opinions and introduced total surveillance. Now in Austria, if you drive on a motorway, there will be cameras that constantly monitor your number plate. And if there is an action somewhere, they will know animal rights cars which have driven there. Or if there has somebody filmed in a factory farm, they will look through this and find who has driven to that place. One example of the first conviction with the ag law, you see here at the factory farm, and you see the public roads going through it, and the person went there and actually spoke with the farmer in the middle of the day and secretly took pictures into the barn while speaking to the farmer. And he was convicted 400 euro for doing this. And that's prior to the complete criminalization. In future, he might have go to prison for it. Corporate spying. I'm sure, because I've seen it often. Newbies come to such place and think we are amongst us, so now we can be honest. Yeah, if we are again, and if we are effective against animal industries, guess how many spies will be sitting here? It doesn't cost them anything. If you have 300 million euro to buy a Formula 1 racing team, why shouldn't you send for 5,000 euro somebody here and have a report on what's happening? And who are the mouthy ones? And secretly film them so that they have ammunition against them. Why should you not do that? Tell me that. We had a corporate spy recently, but we only know about that because she was a witness in court. This woman, the one on the right, came to us, she demonstrated with us, she wrote private emails to me, she tried to entice me saying radical things. She asked us, who has put this placard somewhere? Can you know, it's weird and so on. And suddenly she was the crown witness in the court case against me for libel. And she stood up there and said, this guy is so radical. I've been protesting with him and I'm turned away because he's so radical. And these are the emails he sent to me, look privately, and they are so radical. And I was convicted, you know, I jump a bit the queue because I'm running out of time, but I was convicted, stop a moment for breathing. I was convicted to pay one of the richest people in Austria 36,000 euros privately for having insulted him. And it wasn't actually me, it was a comment on a Facebook page that has nothing to do with me. But the court ruled on basis, amongst other things, on the witness statement of this woman that I'm an evil person. And I am somebody who secretly draws all the things so that everything that's happening in animal rights in Austria is actually me, even if you can't prove it. And they said, 36,000 euros, I have to pay privately. It isn't VGT paying, because the tax inspectors came and said, if VGT is paying this, we will get you for it. I have to pay that privately. And this nice man, one of the richest men in Austria, he started the next procedure and he's asking for 60,000 euros now. And he's again saying, I've insulted him. You know, this is the thing we are at the moment up against. And I'm happy to hear positive stories from you, but I haven't got them for you. This book I suggest reading, Secret Maneuvers in the Dark by Evelyn Luberts. We had her as a workshop. She has started an NGO and she helps you identify corporate spies. If you now say, we don't have corporate spies, I hope you don't eventually end up in court with your friends standing in front of you who turn out to be corporate spies. In this book, she relates a story from British airspace. There was a campaign against them for some fighting plane, and British airspace put a spy into this NGO. And this spy worked her way up to become CEO. At the end of the day, the NGO that was against the company was led by a spy that was paid by that company. Let that sink in, and then, and then try to be prepared. I've told a few things about this because of running out of time. I'm jumping it, but there is actually, there are 4 pillars of society in order to uphold democracy. There's the legislative government, which is very strongly in the hands of big business. If you hear big business CEOs talk, they will say 80% of our time we're talking to politicians. And guess what they will be talking? Not about funny films, but about what their demands are for the future. And they listen. And they listen because there's a strong pressure they can put on governments, because they say, I'm just leaving, and then you will have unemployment, and then you will have less taxes. So do what I want you to do, and then we are happy. The police is being more and more being given free range of persecuting activists by such a government that is in the hand of big business. The media are more and more in the hand of big business, and the courts are increasingly too. This judge that I told you about, who ruled that this hunter was actually really took these cameras and did that violence, there's now big procedures against that judge. They made up witnesses that actually claim that he is secretly connected to us, that he's sympathetic, that they've seen him do something somewhere sympathetic. And I know that this is all not true. We have never met this person before. But this is how far these people go, you know. If there is a judge ruling sensibly and objectively, then they fire at him whatever they have to get rid of them and make a sign to other judges. If you don't rule like we want you to, then you see what will happen to this guy. It seems to me, being in the midst of this and about to drown, that democracy might just be a brief period in history, but not something that we can rely on. Last slide. So what can be done? It sounds so terrible, everything, but what can be done is political resistance. I hear people giving talks, and they're very good, that vegans, we all need to become vegans, and we are vegans, and we need to change everybody vegan. But is a vegan person somebody who is politically aware about this and helping to stop that and acting to stop subsidies for animal farming and changing the political landscape and changing vivisection, for example, where consumer boycott doesn't actually help much? Is every vegan person part of our movement? I don't think so. In this opinion poll, we also asked the vegans what they think about this ag-gag law, where we go to prison for filming. 10% of those people who said they're vegan or vegetarian find it good if we go to prison for filming in a factory farm. I don't consider them part of our movement. So being vegan is not part of movement. Being politically minded, having this goal of animal liberation. And therefore, I'm not criticizing you if you do safe actions or AV or vegan outrage, it's all fine. But don't forget, that the big business will just turn us off if they want to and if they feel threatened enough. And what we need is more than that. We need vegans to become politically aware and to turn into political activists. We need to challenge the power of big business. And at least as long as we can before they start killing us. We need to restrict their freedom of profit. We need to make sure that the politicians don't just listen to them, but also restrict their things. We need also to set up non-commercial media, which is happening, but which they have not that far reached at the moment. There's an excitement about Facebook, I see here. Maybe I'm too old for Facebook, that is possible. I've paid 36,000 euro for a comment on Facebook without being on Facebook myself, which is quite impressive. But yeah, that's the way this world works. But Facebook is owned by a company. What do we know what these algorithms are doing and who they send this information to? And what must happen that this Facebook is suddenly sending messages somewhere else or just stopping your reach? I mean, you know, do you want to be dependent on big business with a clear agenda to increase profits? And also with this fact in mind that all big business is actually acting like a psychopath without empathy. So we should question if we want to rely on that. Mass confrontational actions combine undercover investigations, which are very good, with a campaign to actually change the system in society. Fight repression laws, surveillance, ag-gag, and that in coalition with as many other social justice movements as we can master, because in Austria now, the others feel the pressure too. I mean, animal rights movement in Austria is by far the worst hit. And they are surprised when we tell them our stories and our court cases. The government has one main state enemy, and that's the animal rights movement. But the others are feeling the pressure, the heat now as well. We have started a solidarity NGO group that gets all NGOs in and that's alerting them about this. And we have signed a solidarity agreement that we help other NGOs if they were attacked by the state or by police. And we try to build up now a large resistance movement. But that might not all apply to you. Maybe you have happy governments that are always ethical. Maybe you have big business that is happy to drop profits for empathy reasons. But maybe that is your future. So I'm just telling you the situation as it is with us. You do out of this what you think. Thank you.
If you have any questions for Martin, you can go up to him and ask. He's welcome to speak with you privately, one-on-one. And he has his books. We're going to get our next speaker up onto the stage. But thank you, Martin, again for your speech.